When the private helicopter landed on the dusty lot of Murphy's Auto Repair the next morning, Cassandra James thought she was hallucinating from the fumes. The rotor blades whipped her coveralls as a man in a $1,000 suit stepped out, walking directly toward her with purpose that made her grease-stained hands tremble. 24 hours earlier, Cassandra had been driving home from another grueling 16-hour shift at the garage, her 1998 Honda Civic coughing through the wealthy Hillcrest district like an apology. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could rebuild any engine blindfolded, but couldn't afford to fix her own car properly. The radio crackled with news about tech moguls and their latest acquisitions, while she counted the crumpled bills in her wallet, wondering if she'd have enough for both gas and groceries this week. That's when she saw the silver Porsche 911 Turbo pulled over on Magnolia Avenue, steam rising from its hood like expensive incense. The car was worth more than she'd make in 5 years, sitting there vulnerable and broken despite its pedigree. Traffic flowed around it in the typical Los Angeles fashion, everyone too busy, too important, too scared to get involved. Cassandra pulled over without thinking, her mechanic's instincts overriding her exhaustion. The woman standing beside the Porsche looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine shoot. Platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves over a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than Cassandra's monthly rent. Diamond earrings caught the afternoon light, and her manicured nails drummed impatiently against her designer purse. She was on her phone, speaking in clipped, frustrated tones. "Excuse me," Cassandra said, approaching with her hands visible and non-threatening. She'd learned this approach years ago. Black woman, expensive neighborhood, broken down car nearby. "I'm a mechanic. I can take a look if you'd like." The blonde woman's eyes swept over Cassandra's oil-stained coveralls, her natural hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her worn work boots. The assessment was swift and dismissive. "I don't think so," she said, not even ending her phone call. "I've already called AAA. They'll send someone qualified." Cassandra felt the familiar sting but kept her voice steady. "Ma'am, I can see from here it's just overheating. Probably a blown hose or thermostat issue. I've got tools in my car. Could have you running in 10 minutes. The woman finally looked at her directly, and Cassandra saw something cold and calculating in those blue eyes. "Listen, I appreciate the gesture," she said, the pause loaded with condescension. "But this is a $100,000 car. I need someone who knows what they're doing." "I understand," Cassandra replied quietly. "I work on Porsches all the time. Actually, I specialized in European imports when you were what?" The woman's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Look, I'm sure you mean well, but people like you don't understand vehicles like this. This isn't some Honda you can bang back together with duct tape. Please, just move along." "People like you." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Cassandra felt her jaw tighten, but she'd heard worse. She'd been hearing worse her whole life. In the Army, when she'd outperformed half her unit in mechanical aptitude tests. In trade school, where she'd graduated top of her class. At every job interview where they'd seen her name on the resume versus her face in person. "AAA's going to be at least an hour in this traffic," Cassandra said, glancing at her watch. "It's getting dark, and this isn't the safest place to be stranded." The woman's phone rang, and she answered without acknowledging Cassandra's words. "Daniel? Yes, I'm still stuck? No, some woman stopped, but I sent her away. I don't know, she looked like she works at one of those quick lube places." Cassandra turned to leave, then stopped. The Porsche's engine bay was slightly visible from her angle, and she could see the telltale signs of coolant pooling beneath the car. Not just overheating, the upper radiator hose had blown completely. The woman would be waiting for hours, and if she tried to restart the engine, she'd likely warp the head gaskets. That would turn a $50 fix into a $5,000 rebuild. She walked back to her Honda and grabbed her tool bag, ignoring the woman's continued phone conversation. Approaching the Porsche, she popped the hood latch from inside the cabin, muscle memory from years of working on similar models. The woman spun around, outraged. "What do you think you're doing? Get away from my car!" "Your upper radiator hose blew," Cassandra said calmly, examining the engine bay. "See this green fluid? That's coolant. You try to drive this, you'll seize the engine. I've got a universal hose in my kit that'll get you home." "I said get away from my car." The woman's voice pitched higher, drawing attention from passing pedestrians. "I don't want your hands on my vehicle!" Cassandra looked up from the engine, meeting those cold blue eyes. For a moment, she saw herself reflected in the woman's gaze. a black woman in coveralls, hands already dirty from an honest day's work, presuming to touch something beautiful and expensive. The old anger rose in her chest, the same fury that had driven her to excel despite every obstacle, every dismissal, every time someone had looked at her and seen less than what she was. But then she looked at the puddle of coolant growing larger beneath the car, thought about the woman stranded in the dark, and the anger transformed into something else. Pity, maybe. Or just the simple recognition that someone needed help, regardless of how they'd asked for it. Without another word, Cassandra began working. She drained the remaining coolant, removed the blown hose, and installed the replacement with practiced efficiency. The woman continued protesting, even threatening to call the police, but Cassandra tuned her out. This was her language, the mechanical symphony of wrench on bolt, the satisfying click of connections made properly, the quiet satisfaction of diagnosis and repair. 15 minutes later, she refilled the coolant system and started the engine. It purred to life, smooth as silk, temperature gauge reading normal. She closed the hood and began packing her tools. "That'll hold until you can get to a proper shop," she said, not looking up. "Have them check your water pump while they're at it. Might be starting to fail." The woman stared at the Porsche's dashboard, watching the temperature gauge hold steady in the normal range. The engine's idle was perfect, no trace of the earlier distress. She looked at Cassandra with something that might have been surprise or confusion or the beginning of recognition. "How much do I owe you?" she asked quietly. Cassandra shouldered her tool bag and met her eyes. "Nothing. Just pay it forward sometime." She was halfway to her Honda when the woman called out, "Wait! I'm sorry, that was wrong of me." Cassandra paused but didn't turn around. "Yeah, it was. What's your name?" "Cassandra James." "I'm Victoria Hart." Cassandra nodded once and got in her car. As she drove away, she saw Victoria Hart in her rearview mirror, standing beside her perfectly running Porsche, watching the Honda disappear into traffic. The next morning at Murphy's Auto Repair started like any other. Cassandra arrived at 7 sharp, coffee in hand, ready for another day of brake jobs and oil changes. The shop was her sanctuary, a place where skill mattered more than perception, where a job well done spoke louder than any prejudice. Old Murphy had hired her straight out of the Army, one of the few shop owners willing to look past assumptions and see talent. She was elbow deep in a Chevy transmission when the helicopter appeared. At first, it was just a distant thrum, the kind of sound that makes you look up from your work. But the noise grew louder, more insistent, until it was impossible to ignore. Through the shop's open bay doors, Cassandra watched a pristine white helicopter descend onto the empty lot next door, its rotors kicking up a dust storm that sent papers and debris swirling through the air. "Jesus Christ," Murphy muttered, emerging from his office. "What the hell's that about?" The other mechanics gathered at the bay doors, gawking as the helicopter settled onto the cracked asphalt. Cassandra wiped her hands on a rag, her heart beginning to race with a premonition she couldn't name. The aircraft's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Behind him came Victoria Hart. Cassandra's stomach dropped. Victoria looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, more human. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, her platinum hair pulled back in a ponytail that reminded Cassandra of her own practical style. But it was her expression that stopped Cassandra cold. Gone was the cold dismissal of the previous evening. In its place was something that looked almost like shame. The man scanned the shop with sharp eyes until they landed on Cassandra. His face broke into a smile that was both warm and calculating, the expression of someone who'd built an empire on reading people and situations. "Cassandra James?" he called out, approaching with his hand extended. "That's me," she replied, not moving from her position beside the Chevy. Her colleagues formed a loose semicircle behind her, their curiosity palpable. "Daniel Hart," he said, stopping a respectful distance away when she didn't immediately respond to his outstretched hand. "Victoria's husband. I believe you met my wife yesterday." Cassandra's eyes flicked to Victoria, who stood slightly behind her husband, studying her manicured nails. "I helped her with a car problem. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" Daniel's laugh was genuine, delighted. "Cassandra, you have no idea what you did yesterday. Victoria called me from the roadside, furious and embarrassed. Not because her car broke down, but because of how she treated the person who stopped to help her." "I don't need an apology," Cassandra said carefully. We're good. Oh, but you do need something, Daniel continued, his smile widening. You need recognition. You need investment. You need someone to see what I'm seeing right now. He gestured toward the shop, taking in the organized chaos of automotive repair, the pride evident in every properly maintained tool, the respect her colleagues showed her simply by standing behind. Her. Victoria told me you diagnosed and repaired her Porsche in 15 minutes with basic tools. She also told me you specialized in European imports, past tense. Where was that? Cassandra hesitated, old defensive instincts warring with curiosity. Hoffman Motors in Beverly Hills, 5 years. Hoffman's, Daniel nodded appreciatively. They service our fleet. Why did you leave? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Cassandra felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the weight of explanations she'd given too many times to too many people who'd already made up their minds. Different priorities, she said finally. Bullshit, Daniel said, and Victoria flinched at her husband's language. I made some calls this morning. Carl Hoffman told me you were the best mechanic he ever had. Said you could diagnose problems other technicians missed, that customers specifically requested you for their high-end vehicles. He also said you left after repeated conflicts with management about advancement opportunities. Cassandra's hands clenched around the rag she was holding. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me if Carl was right. Were you passed over for promotions you'd earned? The shop had gone quiet except for the distant hum of the helicopter's cooling engines. Cassandra felt her colleagues' attention like a weight, their unspoken support giving her strength. 3 times, she said quietly. Supervisor positions went to technicians with half my experience and half my certifications. But they looked the part, didn't they? Daniel's voice carried an edge of steel. They fit the image Carl thought his Beverly Hills clientele expected. Cassandra didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. Daniel nodded grimly, then his expression shifted back to that calculating warmth. I own 17 businesses, Cassandra, tech companies, real estate, manufacturing. But my first love, my first investment, was a small auto restoration shop in Detroit 30 years ago. I've never forgotten what it takes to build something from nothing, to see potential where others see problems. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. I've been looking for the right person to partner with on a new venture. A high-end automotive service center focused on European and exotic vehicles. Someone with the technical expertise to handle million-dollar cars and the character to treat every customer with respect, regardless of how they treat you. Cassandra's heart began to race, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not looking for charity. Good, because I'm not offering any. Daniel opened the portfolio, revealing architectural drawings and business plans. This is a $40 million investment. The facility is already under construction in West Hollywood. 150 employees when fully operational. I need a head of operations, someone who understands both the technical and human sides of the business. He handed her the portfolio, and Cassandra found herself looking at plans for a facility that was everything she'd ever dreamed of. State-of-the-art equipment, dedicated spaces for every type of automotive work, even a customer lounge that looked like a 5-star hotel lobby. The position pays $400,000 a year to start, plus equity, Daniel continued. You'd have full operational control, budget authority, and the freedom to hire and train your own team. The only requirement is that you maintain the standard you showed yesterday, excellence in service, regardless of who needs help. Cassandra looked up from the plans to find Victoria watching her intently. The blonde woman stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. I was horrible to you yesterday. I made assumptions based on prejudices I didn't even realize I had. You could have left me there, could have told me exactly what you thought of my attitude. Instead, you fixed my car and asked for nothing in return. She paused, seeming to gather courage. Daniel's business philosophy is that character matters more than credentials. The talent comes in packages people don't always expect. Yesterday, you proved both of those things. This isn't about guilt or charity. It's about recognizing excellence when we see it. Cassandra looked around the shop at her colleagues' faces, Murphy grinning like a proud father, the other mechanics nodding their encouragement. This place had been her refuge, her proving ground, her home. But it had also been her limitation, the ceiling she'd accepted because she'd grown tired of fighting for recognition that should have been automatic. When do you need an answer? She asked. Daniel's smile was triumphant. How about now? The helicopter's fueled and ready. I'd like to show you the facility, introduce you to the construction team, let you see what we're building. Cassandra looked down at her coveralls, suddenly aware of the grease under her fingernails, the oil stains that had become as much a part of her uniform as the patches on her sleeves. I'm not exactly dressed for a business meeting. You're dressed like someone who knows how to work, Daniel replied. That's exactly what I want my partner to look like. As Cassandra walked toward the helicopter, portfolio clutched in her hands, she felt the weight of every dismissal, every condescending smile, every time someone had looked at her and seen less than what she was. But she also felt something else, the recognition that sometimes excellence finds its own reward. Sometimes doing the right thing for its own sake creates opportunities that ambition alone never could. The helicopter lifted off, carrying her toward a future she'd never dared to imagine, built on a foundation of character that no one could question or take away. Below, Murphy's auto repair grew smaller, but the lessons learned there, integrity, excellence, perseverance, would remain the cornerstones of everything she was about to build. Victoria Hart sat across from her in the helicopter's luxurious cabin, no longer the dismissive woman from the roadside. I'm sorry, she said again, her words barely audible over the rotor noise. I want to do better. Cassandra nodded, watching Los Angeles spread out beneath them like a circuit board of possibilities. We all do, she replied. That's why we get second chances. As the helicopter banked toward West Hollywood, toward a construction site that would become her domain, Cassandra James allowed herself to smile. Excellence, she'd learned, was its own reward. But recognition, when it finally came, felt pretty good too.